Welcome to alAndar, a podcast dedicated to sharing and discussing art. It's sort of like show and tell, but for grown-ups. Marcos de Jesus de la Guagua is a singer, songwriter, and rapper. He is multi-talented, multi-dimensional, multicultural, multilingual, and many multi-other things. I am proud and lucky enough to call him a good friend and to start this project with him. And I'm just Jim. My government name is James Noguera. I'm a fiction writer and poet, a university instructor, and a podcaster. I've published and self-published work online and have an MFA in creative writing. Marcos and I both love art, and like proud parents, want to show you baby pics. This podcast is a podcast we are figuring out alAndar, or on the way. We plan to do episodes at about once a month, and we look to increase that to 2 a month as the podcast grows. I will release the audio version of the first 2 episodes at least on the web host for my podcast, Jim Nog Pod. I figure if you like Jim Nog Pod, you will probably like alAndar. We have also opened up a brand new YouTube channel for the podcast, and I highly encourage you to subscribe. The link will be in the description, in the show notes to this audio and to this video. So please subscribe there to help us out. In this episode, we talk about productivity, meaning, and process. It's hard to find the right balance. For an artist, the mandate of creation demands sacrifice. And now, let us find the way on the way, or alAndar.
Hey, Jim, for you, what's productivity?
That's a good question. Productivity for me is, it seems like a simple question, but it's really not for me. I would say it's getting the things done that, upon reflection, achieve the greatest amount of overall happiness. So there's obviously triage in that, I have to choose the things that are the most important because everything won't get done. That's one of the tragedies of life, you can't read every good book, you can't listen to every good song. Maybe you can, I don't know. This depends on what you think is a good song. Reading takes more time. Yeah, that's kind of what I think. What about you?
Cool. It's first, I find that it's mostly something I'm conscious of in its absence, or at least these are the beliefs these are the scripts that are running in the back of my head, a voice that's quiet and gets louder and louder. The less can get very loud at times. This is not productive. Yes, for me, it's also sort of hard to grasp. And at the same time, it's something that I'm reaching for a lot. A lot of my energy is directed toward some sense of being fruitful. What I've come up with is related to what you said about upon reflection. And one of the thoughts I've come to is my guess of what I would have liked to have done in whatever time I have in this day, when looking back, is a pretty good measure of what I would really like to do. For me, that's been a pretty important frame. Does it sound, but I don't know how it sounds outside of my brain. How does that sound when you hear it? Should I say it again?
Yeah, say it again.
So there's just a bunch of things that are fuzzy here, right? So my guess of what I imagine I would have liked to have done today is upon reflection, at the end of the day, is a pretty good measure of what I would most like to do today.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. It made me think about several things. Like the first thing it made me think about is at the end of the day, I find it helpful. This is such a simple practice, but it really makes me, I think it adds value to my life. And I might have heard this somewhere else. I write down mistakes that I feel that I made throughout the day. And then that might sound masochistic. It's not. It doesn't make me feel that bad. It's just things that I could have done better. It's I'll just give you an easy example. I watched too much YouTube today. I watched too much, and then how can I fix that? How can I just, aim closer to the bullseye on the days that I have. And the other thing it made me think about is regret, and how I think regret is part of not just life, because as what is it, Seneca said, errare humanum est, right? To err is human. We're error machines. That's what we do. And hopefully we learn through those errors, but we're going to keep making them. But part of prioritizing is understanding that we're going to fail. Part of prioritizing is understanding that we can't do it all, and we will face some regret. And so we're trying to reduce the amount of regret that we experience later in life. And I can relate to that. I mean, yeah, that sounds, I applaud you for mentioning it, because it's, it's vulnerable. It's putting yourself out there. But I want to empathize, maybe commiserate, because, yeah, man, what are you going to do? There's only so much time on the Earth. Did you know that on Mars, the day is about 40 minutes longer, if I'm remembering that correctly? So there you go. They're going to be more productive, because you're going to have more time during the day.
I think that is meaningful, in a sense of just noting that our doing and our being is within a context, it's within a finite context, within a container, right? In a sense. And the container can be sort of invisible because we're used to it. The container of one lifetime, or one day, or one apartment, or income. But by describing the day on Mars, that's like I'm aware of a different that there are different possible containers. Yeah, and also reminds me, helps me remember. Well, I think what I want to ask is something about what's helpful about, are there contexts where you find it helpful to be like, I can do anything, or thing, where the contexts where like the notion of limitless possibility is helpful compared to what we've mostly been talking about, like stoic acceptance of limitations.
So your question is about like how useful, positive, I can do it mindset is versus
or how toxic
versus like a more stoic approach, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Which are both important. I think they're both really important. I'm a big fan of some of the elements of stoicism, which I studied in college as an undergrad. And there are certain things about that are really helpful for me dealing with difficult things, difficult emotions. That stoicism can help you reach a certain level of imperturbability, I think was the term that I learned in college. And how Aristotle sort of disagreed with that notion that you were throwing sand in your eyes if you thought that you could be happy without certain things like friends and family and so on. So I think there's that. I think Aristotle is right. There's certain, we're wired a certain way, and it would be nice to feel like you don't need, say, anybody, and you're good in and of yourself. But I think that we're flesh and blood beings, and for better or for worse, like we need certain things, like love, for instance. But there's a certain mindset. It reminds me, if you don't mind, of Kanye West. I've been watching the documentary Genius. It's, I think, indisputable that his mindset of believing in himself, I mean, to possibly, bordering on psychopathy, belief in himself, is responsible for his success. Yeah, I mean, watch the documentary to get fuller details, but like, you can see how that's useful, and the ways that he just kept trying, and the ways that he believed in himself, despite sort of the difficulties and things that he was going through. And then you look at the level of achievement he's achieved. It's remarkable. So, a certain sense of stoicism might not have done Kanye much good. If he thought he was imperturbable and he was just fine, and what was it? Raucous didn't sign him, and just forget about that. Big deal. Something will come eventually. Like, that might not have been the best thing for him, and everybody's different. Yeah, so I don't know, but I can see sort of the pros and cons of each thing. I think it's important to be measured, and find the appropriate context for things. Stoicism for me is really powerful in certain contexts. Dealing with difficult emotion, dealing with difficult times. I have leaned heavily on the Stoics, but Aristotle has taught me to that I'm not Superman, and that if I want to do better, I want to be better, I have to rig the odds in my favor. Those are just some of my extemporaneous thoughts on the topic.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I'd like to state the problem for me, and then specifically talking about productivity and artwork and purpose-driven artwork, right? And then sort of get any thoughts that you have about, especially about about any aspect. All right.
Yeah, sounds good.
So there's one set of challenges that relate to having neurodiversities, that relates to, or neurodivergence, that relates to deficits of executive function. And I think in this case, deficit, it's helpful to think of that in like financial terms, right? So when you're balancing your books, you're in deficit of executive resources. So you're in deficit of, if you thought of that organizationally, that would be like management in general, right? At all levels. And especially you notice it at the higher levels of planning. So that's one background reality, and so that just creates a couple of things that I experienced. One is that there's such a dramatic gap between the things that the effort that it takes, that even means the emotional work I have to do to persist on anything that I have to make myself do, compared to the experience of things that I can just let myself do. And a lot of the things that I can just let myself do are good things to do, are meaningful, are my highest vocations. And I can see them, I can embrace them as Christian vocations for me, because there's a sense of productivity toward purpose, and a purpose that's at an intersection of my heart's joy and a need in the world. Your heart's great joy and the world's great need. As a Christian intersection of Christian vocation is something I embrace. So stuff I can just let myself do in some fantasy version of my life. No, not even any fantasy version of my life. In a version of my life where I have a team that I'm comfortable working with, and that embraces my strengths and my deficits and my purpose. Sure, I could mostly just do the stuff that I only have to let myself do, and achieve and self-actualize, right? So move up the pyramid of human needs to be all that I can be. So in reality, a lot of what I most feel called to do requires support and coordination from stuff between tasks that I only need to let myself do and tasks that I have to make myself do, or I have to direct myself in doing. And yeah, man, just that the incongruity builds up over time. And then there's sort of the third category of stuff that I have, that I just have to do to survive. And then also like, well, life, you know, because everything I'm considering up to there is productivity. So like last night, or yesterday, I had a pretty productive day using organizational structures, and I followed those structures. And then at like 9, I thought I'd spend 20 minutes sorting some of my old music files. At 4 a.m., I stopped working. You know, no, at like 3:30, something like that. I stopped working, and I had to put on something that was just as stimulating to pull me away from it, to pull me away from the music, right? Because I didn't just, now if I had just done what I said I was going to do, which was just tidy the files, there wouldn't have been a creative element. It wouldn't have sparked my brain and gotten me to a place where I was just able to do something meaningful that I only had to let myself do. Like, anyhow, so at the end of that, I think I have some things that are beautiful, but I don't know if I have any product, you know? So talking this through out loud, I realized that one of the things that I thought was a question for me, I'm actually pretty clear about in my heart. Like, I embrace being self-reliant as much as I need to be. And I embrace my responsibilities in community, you know? But I'm not prioritizing money. I'm basically all right with, yeah, I'm not prioritizing money. But like right there, like you've sort of entered into the absurd to just sort of say something like that. And yeah, so on the one hand, I'm working on persisting in doing what I have to do, finding joy in the self work toward self-actualizing, inspirational art, music that I can do. So just like keeping that focus is one struggle. And then the other struggle is the actual work. Staying in it is one struggle. And then the other struggle that I'm very conscious of is the actual workflow. And that is something that I think is mostly tactical, right? I think there are specific best practices that I'm trying to learn. And it's mostly the kind of problem that writers have, you know? It's mostly a problem about what is like iterative development, you know, and delivery, you know? So any thoughts about either one of those? What do you know about The second one being, what do you know about how writers can use their time productively? You know, um, uh, and what do you know? So that would either be, in terms of generating work or getting or reaching an audience. And what do you know about, I don't know, sacrifice and meaning, like the meaning money balance?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of information, and I think there's a lot of vulnerability in what you're saying. And again, I just want to thank you for that. Um, I also have, I guess, my own neurodivergence. Um, I suspect that haven't been officially diagnosed, but that might have Asperger's. Um, and there might be other things or might not be other things, some mild this or that. I'm not sure. But I do identify with some of the symptoms that I've heard about for Asperger's. And so I understand mm, that sort of, and I think everybody does, the what I what I want to do and what I have to make myself do.
Yeah.
And that becomes increasingly difficult, I feel like, because of modern technology and
Yeah.
all of these giant companies that get rich off of our attention.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I mentioned YouTube earlier, which does steal a lot of my attention, but I'm getting better at managing that. Yeah, in terms of like writing, dealing with the process, and yeah, and yeah, let's start there. I mean, well, it's interesting you mentioned um strategies. I forget what you call them, productivity strategies or something like that.
Tactics, right?
Tactics.
We're not using this distinction in common language, but there's a distinction, right? Tactics are for a battle, strategies are for a war.
Mm-hmm.
So tactics being for the smaller, sort of solvable problems, strategies, sort of for the ongoing,
Yeah.
Paradigm struggles.
Mm. Yeah. And yeah. And I have strategies and tactics for different situations. But for me, and you also, again, you mentioned sort of the things that we have to do to just living in capitalist structure and as human beings, with all of our needs, and how that can help or hinder workflow. I find that for me, having routine, which is a very Asperger's thing, by the way, but having routine is really helpful. And so for me, I like to wake up early and do my writing first thing. Not first thing. Like I'll wake up, I'll brush my teeth, wash my face, and everything, and I'll try to stretch and meditate for a little bit, because I think that's a good time to sort of get perspective and be in the right mindset. But yeah, the first hour or two, I spend creative writing, and having that as a routine that I can do every day helps to get that done. And obviously, you want to do it before everything else, because the things you leave for last don't get done as much, and and
That's a good principle. Could you say that again, please?
yeah, the things that you leave last typically don't get done,
Yeah.
and that's been something I relearn all the time. Um, you know, and so yeah, life is about triage, and getting things done is about triage. You have to pick, you know, what you're going to regret the least, um, and what I want to regret the least are the things that give me the most meaning. And so as artists, I think we really just art gives us a lot of meaning. You know, there are different tactics and strategies, you know, like rewarding yourself and for doing certain things, and certain productivity hacks. I really like Tim Ferriss and the 4 Hour Work Week, because there are a lot of good, you know, productivity hacks in that, batching and um, working from home when that's possible. That was pre-pandemic, so that's definitely possible now. And 80/20 principle, right? So, like, let's say you're running a business, and and
Okay.
That 20% of your customers might be causing you 80% of the problems.
Yeah.
And so getting rid of those customers would help you save like 80% of whatever, of your profit or your time or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So he does advocate sometimes in the context of business in this case, to to let those people go, because they're not worth it, because they they're causing a productivity problem within the work environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can apply that to just life in general. So there might be 20% of things that you can cut. For me, it might be just Netflix or whatever. And I can instead, as I often do now, is like I just choose to like edit, those times when I'm grabbing something to eat. I will edit either a podcast or a video, and it's like a small chunk of time that I normally just like, you know, just watch something, because it's like time to kill or whatever. But I find that I it's a really productive time for me sometimes. Um, so that wasn't quite writing, but podcasting, videos, they're art too, and anyway, they motivate me as well in a similar kind of way.
Yeah. So there's sometimes a conflict between um so I want to go circle back to the meaning versus money thing, or balancing meaning and money question, because I heard you address the what do you know about productivity as a writer in a bunch of ways that were really that are quite meaningful for me. And actually, let me first echo that. And then there's an esoteric thing I'd like to ask about. Um, but it ends up being huge in my experience. Um, so, all right. Uh, um, the poet, whose name is escaping me right now, author of Wild Geese, poem with that amazing line.
Oh,
You don't, which let me circle back to that because that relates to the esoteric question. But she had an office job, like I think until retiring, or maybe she still does. But her routine was to get up very early and walk she lived in a place where she could walk in nature pretty easily. And she would sort of let her brain go into poetry mode, relax into poetry mode in that time, and then have the writing period after that walk. And she called it having my say. And then I could go through my day, letting the world have its say. And be interested in other people's jobs. and the one I did the rest of the day, because I know I'd already done my job, so like write first, put the important things early. That seems very meaningful to me. I think there's one other point, but then into Tim Ferriss, is that his name?
yeah, Tim Ferriss.
Ferriss. Yeah, I think he has a number. You've shared some of that stuff with me before, but I think I might be ready to mobilize some of that or to comprehend it a little better now. So thank you for breaking down 80-20. I'd heard it explained before, but I hadn't gotten it really before. Was there another key point that you made that you recall?
Triage, regret.
Regret. Now that's very interesting. It seems like your attitude toward regret is different, or the way you feel about regret.
Okay, explain that.
Than mine. I was thinking we're similar in so many ways, but it's like we're sort of like a similar person, but from alternate universes. So like, I think my body mind tends to be driven by like maximizing meaningful experience. And it seemed like you were describing receiving satisfaction from minimizing regret.
I might not see the difference there. I might be arguing that those are kind of, semantically different, but we might be talking about the same thing. What do you think?
Well, let me try. I'll try to apply, just your different language about it and see, I'll report back
Sure.
about that. How about I look at my day as like that just seems sad to me. Opportunities to minimize regret.
Maybe that's my, melodramatic, poetic side. But I think that that's what people mean when they mean happiness, isn't it? Like when they say happiness, they want meaning and purpose, and what takes away from meaning and purpose is, or when you don't achieve it. I think that's poignant feelings of. That's where the poignant feelings of regret come in. I mean, the things that you regret, like, aren't they the things that you didn't do that were meaningful to you? It's not the relationships you didn't have, or the girls that you didn't meet. It's not the not necessarily the money that you didn't make. It's it's what those things mean to you, right? It's the deeper meaning within those things. It's like, why do people chase certain things? Why do people chase money? It's sometimes it's about what it means for that person. Like, it means success. It means, in Kanye's case, it's proving that he is a genius, you know, um, you know, um,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I don't know. What do you think?
No, that's meaningful. So yeah, and that's meaningful, and I'm just going to try to apply it, and report back to you on that. And so that flows right into the esoteric side, which is a word I learned from you.
I'm the type of person who would know that. You know what I mean? Like, it's such an obscure. The word itself is kind of an example of the definition. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. So, yeah. So the esoteric side being, and I think we could close on this if it works for you, the balance between what you do and how you do it, right? And that could mean a number of things, but in this case, what I'm mostly thinking, yeah, actually, I think from a number of different value systems, yeah, I think even different value systems that have pull on me, in a moment or through a day or in a relationship. There's this, my sense of, am I being productive, is informed by this dialectic between, okay, is what I'm doing right now, does it pass these productivity tests, the practical productivity tests that we've described, right? Like the 4-hour work week, and others, versus, is what I'm doing right now meaningful? Is it good? Is it beautiful?
Yeah.
And I have this aspiration of and this sense in my mind that there have been these perfect days, where those things are, actually, thinking about it out loud, I realize it's not so much that those days, that everything that's productive,
yeah,
is also beautiful,
yeah, meaningful.
but it's more those perfect days are sort of days, and like, I also thought you talked about bullseye. Sin comes from being off the bullseye.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of referencing. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, perfect days are days without sin. It's not so much that those have been perfectly beautiful or perfectly productive. Those are days that abide, that are just filled with grace, that abide in grace, where I'm abiding in grace. And so in grace, on the one hand, days of finding a beautiful a beautiful balance, a beautiful path of least resistance, between meaningful and money. And on the other hand, where I find I'm able to forgive myself or accept God's forgiveness for my failure, able to be at peace with my regret, How do you think of that? Do you have a similar experience to that? How do you think of the balance between, what you do, how you do it, what's meaningful, what's money making, what's, result producing?
Okay. I think in brief, what I would say is that I mean, I thought of a couple of things while you were talking. Like, um, there's the idea that with the meaning, like meaning versus productivity. Like, um, you know, oftentimes we want to be productive, but we can be productive in an unmeaningful way,
Mhm.
and you need both. I think if you want to be um, meaningfully happy. Um, because productivity helps you do more meaningful things, but only if you meaningfully do these things. Um, in
Mm.
terms of money, it's that balance, right? It's the
Well, I don't literally mean money. I mean like money, like in the movie Swingers. You're so money. Like,
I didn't
uh,
see that. Sorry.
I know that's the best part. It's you don't need
Okay.
to. Like, so meaningful versus measurable, I guess,
Sure.
and the balance.
Mm. Yeah, man, that's hard. Um,
Yeah.
Meaningful versus measurable. Um, it's like trying to quantify quality. Um,
Yes.
you know, trying to quantify the qualitative,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
the ought from the is. Like that's what it reminds me. It reminds me of like ought versus is, the ought is problem. Like you know the the quality of like the meaning, the quality of life versus the things that you can measure that are factual and stuff like that. And sometimes you can't, right? Like sometimes you can't justify in productivity terms the things that you're doing, but you do them because they make you happy.
Mhm.
And people lose sight of that sometimes when they chase money, in a literal sense, because they forget that the reason they're working that job so much and trying to make so much money is to live a more meaningful life. Um, and they end up not living a more meaningful life. Um, I'll end with a quote from J. Cole. Um, he said, "I think being broke is better." And I don't mean that with any disrespect. I forget the rest of the lines, forgive me. Um,
Yeah, I know that feeling. Like from my favorite rappers, I often hear like "ooh," and I only remember the second half, or I only remember the first half, and then I play it back, and then I forgot again. But my own thoughts, I find it's helpful to keep them, to be able to memorize them. When I do make a couplet around it, right? And so here's one of mine that relates to this conversation. Can't seem to keep from rhyming, though I've been told not to. An artist only does this because they got to.
you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, The wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Mary Oliver, Wild Geese.